Welcome back. So, you may have noticed things look a little bit different from last time. Well, if you notice the date here, we're recording in the future, or more accurately, the current times. It's been 10 months since I shot the last couple videos, and the big difference in the time gap here is that we have some new features. Specifically, I have some new external lines hooked up. And before I go into showing you anything about that, I want to explain why it took so long to hook up external lines. It wasn't because I don't have any. I have lots of external phone lines. The reason why I had such a hard time connecting them to the system is that the BCM, which is the back end of the system that we're using here, works on a key code model. So you don't get all of the features when you buy the BCM. Generally what happens is that you would contact a Nortel installer or a company that does phones, and they'd sell you a BCM, and you would be paying specifically for the types of features that you wanted, such as being able to connect a T1 or an ISDN line, being able to connect digital phones, analog phones, IP trunks. And the BCM was really interesting in that fact. It was very versatile. Businesses could use it whether they wanted all analog lines, all analog phones, digital lines, digital phones, or IP lines or IP phones. It did all three of both trunks and lines in both analog, so in other words, plain old telephone service, your POTS line with your, hook switch. Digital, which is the Nortel proprietary phones, and on the trunk end I'm talking about like T1s, T3s, ISDN, and also IP. Nortel has a handful of IP-based phones. I actually have one right here, I'll show you. Like this, that just plug into your Ethernet network. These are a little bit newer. And this phone system also connects to those, and if you so choose to, can also trunk to SIP providers over the internet so that you don't have to have actual phone lines. Well, the problem is that none of these were enabled in my system. The previous owner of the system was using an expansion bay to connect their external lines, and I can't use the expansion bay for that because I'm using the expansion bay to hook up these sets. The previous owner didn't need to hook up these sets because they had IP sets, which there is a key code for. So ignore all that. Basically what it means is that I paid a lot of money to activate a software license so that I can now have a phone system that actually makes calls, as ridiculous as that sounds. And the thing that makes it even more complicated is the fact that Nortel is out of business. They've gone bankrupt. And normally the key codes are unique to your system and have to be activated by Nortel. So basically I had to pay an independent Nortel installer not only for the key code, but also a substantial charge to activate the key code, which normally would only be possible if Nortel was in business. But yeah, so now we can call outside. Alright, I have two lines hooked up to the system. They're called Hope 1 and Hope 2. If you don't know what the Hope is, there's a link in the description. And you might be saying, well, hold on, in Super Mario 64 there's only one Hope. Well, the reason why we're able to have two Hopes here is specifically due to the key code that I applied. FYI. Okay, our lines are assigned right here. This button is for 061, and this one is for 062. And that's the last time I'm going to refer to the line numbers. The line numbers are not programmable. They're defined based on the phone system you have and which port your line is connected to. So on the BCM, the analog internal lines are 061 through 064. For example, on a compact ICS, they start at 025. Actually, they go 001 through 004, then 025, depending on the module and the system and all that shit. But anyway, it doesn't matter what the numbers are. In fact, most companies wouldn't even print them on the label here. I'm printing them here because, just for fuck's sake, because I know what the numbers are, so fuck you, they're printed on the label. Alright, let's listen to the line. This is line 1. It The dial tone's a little bit louder than the normal intercom dial tone. There it is for comparison. Whenever we're on an external line, you basically start out with the name of the line, and then as you dial, it overlays the digits.
Thank you for calling MCI. Our system indicates you are calling from.
And basically, what happens is that on a digital line, let's say this was a T1, an ISDN line, whatever, that transfer button wouldn't show up until the call was connected, until we had what's called answer supervision. On an analog line, we don't have answer supervision, so the second we pick up the call, this is line 2, we have the option to transfer it. So I can literally transfer this to another phone, and it literally just shows up over here, even though it's well, at this point it's a reorder, but it was a dial tone. I can literally pick up a line and just transfer it. And now it's a dial tone out here. Look, I can keep dialing numbers. And that's the interesting thing is that even though the Norstar system probably could do a little bit of a better job because it hears a dial tone, it knows no digits have been dialed. You know, it's interesting. It's freedom. All right, let me call with my cell phone. We'll see what an incoming call looks like on an external line. So there it is. You notice it flashes half on, half off. My caller ID comes across. If this was a T1 or an ISDN, the caller ID would actually be there the second it started ringing, but in this case it showed up after the fact. And if I don't do anything, it will eventually go to voicemail, but I'll go ahead and pick it up. And you can see that once I'm on the line, it still has my caller ID up here. That's actually a setting in the system. You can program each set to either show the line name, or the number. And that's basically what you see here. You can press info to cycle through them. Let me do a different phone call. This time I'm showing you what a private caller looks like. In other words, the P private flag. So you can see that not only does it say private name, if we hit info, we actually winds up in the same call info feature as hitting feature 811. And we have the name, we can hit more, there's the number, and we hit more, and there's the line. And we can just rotate through those and exit back out. You'll notice that's the same exact thing as hitting feature 811 and the same exact menu. Alright, here's the same thing on a phone with a single line display with no soft keys. You can see the same thing happens here. The phone is set up to see caller ID as soon as it's available. That's not necessarily always on. Sometimes you won't see the caller ID until you pick up the phone, and that's set on a per line per set basis, so I can actually change that setting for each line on each set. Set being what Norstar calls the phones. The phone sets, the telephone sets, whatever. You can't press the button to see any more information. In fact, if you want to see information, you can't even press star and pound because that will just dial star and pound. The only way you can do it is to hit 811 and then use star and pound to cycle through the information. Here's another example. Pick up the phone. Private name, I can't cycle through. I'm going to hit 811. Now I can use pound private number. There's the line, and I can exit out. Well, I don't want to hit hold. In this case, what I want to hit is feature. Actually, even that's kind of difficult. You can't hit hold because then the call will go on hold. You can't hit release because then you'll hang up on the call. And if you hit feature, it starts a new feature. So that's an interesting way. I'm not sure how you'd get out of that without dialing a digit. So the name and the number isn't just caller ID. On our lines, it's analog, so that's exactly how we're receiving it, and we're receiving it between the first and the second digit, which is the standard, the Bell Core standard for caller ID. But if you had a T1 or an ISDN trunk, then you'd be receiving it through some other method, and it would probably show up immediately. It would either be on the D channel of your ISDN, or it would be sent over the T1 through some message, or if you had a SIP trunk, it would be sent in the SIP header. But either way, you would see that information unless you have a trunk that doesn't have caller ID, or you have a trunk that doesn't provide caller name identification, or the call just happens to not have caller identification. It's very possible that you receive a call and just no information is sent, and that's it. I worked in a retail store when I was 18 years old, and in that retail store we had phones just like this, and they did not have trunks with caller ID. The system received it because all the calls came in on a T1, and the DSU, the channel unit, the fucking channel unit, actually provided caller ID on the analog lines that it provided, but the compact Norstar system that we had, just that they didn't pay for the trunks to have caller ID, so we just didn't see anything. In this store that I worked at, we sold phones for like $9 that had caller ID built in. I don't even think we sold any phones that didn't have caller ID. But our own phones, our own several $1,000 business unit series phones didn't have the ability to call. And I didn't even think that it was possible because there's only one line. I mean, that's one thing that Norstar phones are notoriously bashed for, is that you can't see the name and the number at the same time. There's so many forum posts where they're just like, what the fuck? It's more prevalent than when they have this phone here, and they don't understand why they can't see them both at the same time, not realizing that the protocol doesn't allow for that. Alright, so speaking of caller ID, if you think about a caller ID unit or a phone that has caller ID, generally it stores there's a list, there's a history, there's some type of log. Well, we have that. It's called the auto log. And we can access auto log options with #84, is it? Yes, #84. And this phone right now is on no one answered, but I can change this to unanswered by me, which means that calls in which I don't answer, log all calls, no auto logging, and no one answered, which means that the phone rang into voicemail or just was abandoned. So I'm going to change this to log all calls. And what we'll do is we'll call it again. We'll call our line, and we'll receive a call here. And I'm not going to pick it up over here. I'm going to pick it up on a different set, and that was picked up, and it was hung up on. And you'll notice that over here we have this beautiful call for you indication here. And if you'll notice, the phone's ringing again. Private name again, of course. That fucking private caller that always calls us. Someone picked it up on another extension, and they hung up. And you'll notice that it still says call for you. There's still only one call. Interesting. Well, let's call it again. This time I'm calling from my cell phone. It gets picked up on a different extension. Oh, hey, look. This time, it says calls for you. Why did it say call for you the first two times and calls for you the second time? Well, it's actually because the Norstar system stores the history in a consolidated version, so multiple calls by the same number are stored as a single entry, multiple consecutive calls. So when private number called twice, it didn't store a new entry, it just incremented the number in the existing entry. It wasn't until Simon called that it now becomes calls for you. And the soft button says calls, because that's the button we use to go into the call log, which is the same as feature 812. So we're going to go ahead and look in our call log. And you'll notice the first thing we see is how many old entries we have and how many new entries we have. And in this case, they're only new entries, so the only option we have is new. So let's look at our new entries. The first one we have is an unknown call. So, interesting. The other interesting thing is that it says unknown call, because normally it says private name, private number, which is your first tip-off that private name and private number is stored differently than just the string private name as being the caller's name. The caller ID standard has a very specific flag to generate unknown name or blocked name or anonymous caller. Those are special things. They're not actually sent as the string anonymous caller. So if we go back in, you'll notice that since we looked at the first one, now we have one old and one new, and we have some new options. I can review the old one, in which case it's the unknown call again, or I can resume from where I was, and resume goes to the last one that I looked at, the newest entry that I looked at. And then from there I can go to the next one, I can erase, or I can see more information. So this is the time and the date that it was called, and also the number of times. So remember, we called twice, so it says 2x. You can also see that it was on line 1, the most recent time was on line 1, and Montel answered the phone. Good fucking job, Montel. So we can erase that entry. Notice that when I erase it, I can undo that erasure, or I could go on. New calls begin is what it says when we start at the new calls. So you can see, here's me, here's my new call, and I'm going to go ahead and erase that. And it's gone. And now the log is empty. And that's basically your primer in Autolog. Now I'm going to show you a little bit of a different thing, and I'm going to show it to you on the one-line display phone, because it's basically the same log, except we have to use different buttons because we don't have soft keys. But I'm going to show you a different feature. This particular phone, we have it set up auto-logging with no auto-logging. But we're still going to use the log. Notice that if I want to get to the auto-log here, I hit 812, and there's no call soft phone, but the log's empty, so we can't look at it now. We have to get some more calls. So let's generate some incoming calls here. Takes for fucking ever. Hello there. Now, one thing that I'm going to do here is that we don't have auto-logging on, so this hasn't been logged, but you can do feature 813, and that is a function, a feature called logit. And what that did was it just on-demand logged that call. And notice that when we hang up, call for you. So I'm going to go ahead and call from my cell phone. And you notice that I can't hit 813 until I actually pick up the... Actually, wait. I still can't do it. Even though the information has come through, I have to actually pick up the line, and then we can log the call. I'm going to fuck that guy, so we're going to hang up on him. But so now we have calls for you, so we have to hit our feature 812 to get into our call log. And you notice the same thing, we have 0 old, 2 new. And over here we would press star for the old, pound for the new, and if we had some old, we would hit 0 to resume. One interesting note here is that we can actually get an interesting error by hitting 0, no resume item. No resume item. You can't get that error on the 2-line phone because the resume button doesn't show up if you don't have old items. But here you can just hit 0 to emulate the button and it gets upset. No resume item. Interesting. In fact, I wonder... Yes, you can hit 0 and get no resume item even on the 2-line phone. No resume. No resume. Anyway. So over here we're going to hit pound to go into the new one. Here's our unknown call. If we want to see the number or the line, we have to hit the volume up key. That goes to the date and the occurrence. Then it goes to the line. And over here you can see it says thingamabobber logit. Over here is generally what happens, what has gone on with the call. If this shows the name of a set, that's who answered the phone. If it shows this phone and log it, that means that you hit feature 813 to log it. It could also show that it was answered by your voicemail. My voicemail is named Jane, so it would say Jane. So, that's how it works. And then anyway, if you want to go in and erase the item, you would hit, let's see, we have one old, one new. I'm going to hit 0 to resume. I'm going to erase this item, so I'm going to hit hold, and the item is erased. But I can hit any key to undo. Any key except pound will undo the erasure. I could hit the 1, I could hit the hold, I could hit the 2. Notice it's just coming back to unknown call. That's the one I'm erasing, but it's coming back. Item erased, no it's not. I'm going to erase, no it's not. Item erased, 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 nope. That one actually just goes back. It actually did erase it, but it went back as well. If I go to the new one, right there, I could erase, no it's not, erase, no it's not. But if I erase and hit pound, it's the same as hitting OK. And now our log is empty. Booyah. One last feature, it's called auto bumping. What is auto bumping? It's a freaky new sex move. It's feature 815. And when auto bumping is on, it means that if your call log gets full, the oldest object, the oldest entry will get bumped to store the new entry. If auto logging is off, feature pound 815, that means that the log will basically fill up in sequential order and then just stop logging. The call log will be full. No more logs can be logged. But everyone loves auto bumping because it means you don't have to clean out your auto log manually, which is what everyone wants. Booyah. So because the Norstar can interface with all different types of phone lines, there needs to be a universal way to block your name and number. Keep in mind, you can't dial *67 at the intercom dial tone. And if you have an analog line, you can pick up the line and dial *67. But if you're talking about a T1, a SIP trunk, or an ISDN line, you can't. There's no dial tone to dial *67 at. The dial tone you're getting is generated by the Norstar. So there needs to be a universal way to block your name and number for the next call, and that is feature 819, ONN blocking, outgoing name and number blocking. And basically what it does is if you pick up a line that's analog, that pause you just heard was it dialing *67 really quickly. If you use a T1 or an ISDN line or a SIP trunk, the proper flags will be set on that outgoing call to basically enable privacy, enable the privacy flag that blocks your name and number from being sent forward. Obviously, your identity is still known by the phone network, but it's a flag that basically says, hey, the guy I'm calling isn't supposed to be able to see my name and number. You can also turn it off, pound 819, and this feature actually says feature not active if it's not actually active. Let's turn it on and let's turn it off, and now that's the off message. I like finding every possible different message on the phone, on the display there. Do that one more time for you. On, off. For the same reason, on certain systems, feature 897 performs the function of malicious call identification, which is similar to the *57 call trace access code that most landline providers have, that basically flags the call as being a threat or a malicious call, so that if law enforcement is invoked later, they can find that call very easily. Again, that feature is not active here because we don't have the proper ISDN package or whatever is necessary to enable that feature, but that is something that there is in the documentation.